Depending on where you are in the world and when you're watching this video, the ennui of lockdown might be starting to get to you, and your existing lineup of games might have started to look, well, a little dull. I've played Honey Pop to death, you might well be thinking. I need something new. Maybe I'll give that Xbox Games Pass for Windows a try. Well, dear YouTube human, you might well think that. But first, let me arm you with some knowledge. My name's not important, and I'm your guide across the sea of mediocrity to the sparkling shores of 8 out of 10 or better. This is what Metacritic thinks are the... yeah, that's what I was going to say. Number 10, Europa Universalis 4. If you're not a strategy game type, then this isn't the most promising start to the list, but bear with me, this is a really strong and varied top 10, so just hang in there. If, however, this kind of massive, in-depth, world-conquering simulator is your deal, then welcome. Europa Universalis was developed by Paradox and released in 2013, and is really the strategy game for people who looked at the Civilization series and found it just a little too basic. Starting out in your choice of 500 nations from history, you govern and expand through a balance of military strength, trade, colonialism and negotiation, playing against the computer or against other humans via network or internet modes, if you know anyone else with the same stomach for grand strategy as you. In either style of play, be prepared to sink several days of your life into even a single campaign. Europa Universalis knows what it is, and as such the tutorials are labyrinthine and longer than some games' entirety, and the Iron Man mode, which kicks away some of the crutches like manually adjusting your difficulty or saving your game before ever rewarding you with achievements. This isn't for the faint of heart or for the casual gamer. For the right audience though, this is a best-in-class experience and has earned a respectable 87 on Metacritic. Number 9, Forza Horizon 4. Depending on your experience of top 10 critics lists, it may or may not surprise you to learn that, spoiler, this is the first and last modern AAA title on this list. Forza has been a leading racing series for Microsoft since the days of the first Xbox, and, as has been tradition since the days of Gran Turismo, are among some of the most polished, technically accomplished titles for their respective platforms, offering smooth, high-performance gameplay with stunning graphics and plenty of entertainment. This latest title in the franchise is part of the Horizon sub-series, a more arcade racing-style branch of Forza that moves away from formal tracks and instead covers country lanes, highways, dirt tracks and even open fields. Progress through the early game is monitored with the slightly cringeworthy social media influence metric, and once you've opened up the game proper, you'll gain access to various event types, new cars, and even the option to buy property. The game is set in a thematically accurate open-world simulation of the United Kingdom, complete with seasonal weather simulation and towns and cities that, I can verify as a qualified British person, feel authentically British. Forza's greatest strength is the sheer volume of content. For those willing to put the time in, there's never a shortage of things to do, places to see, and different weather conditions to experience each race in. Forza Horizon 4 comes in at a respectable 9th place, with 88% according to Metacritic. Number 8, Dead Cells. 2018's Dead Cells kills you even before the start of the game. So begins this side-scrolling Metroidvania, which adds a decidedly sinister twist to the old Earthworm Jim concept. Only this time you're a weird blob of cells which inhabits corpses in order to break out of the prison you find yourself in, explore, fight, and inevitably die in order to start again. And die you will, as Dead Cells is one of those games that delights in challenging you just enough to make sure you come back for more. Failure means your hijacked cadaver returns to the grave, leaving you to start again, this time learning from your previous mistakes and benefiting from any upgrades you unlocked along the way. Levels, though generally laid out in a particular fashion, are generated procedurally, so no two runs should ever be quite the same. Dead Cells is that kind of platformer that permeates the indie sphere, but manages to stand out not just in its gameplay, but also visually. Its pixel art style graphics and excellent animation convey the game's dark humour, and some quite modern dynamic lighting betrays its retro chic aesthetic. Dead Cells was generally well reviewed and holds a Metacritic rating of 89. Number 7. Ori and the Will of the Wisps. This sequel to the fondly remembered Ori and the Blind Forest is every bit as ethereal and lovingly crafted as its predecessor. Another game in the Metroidvania genre, Ori 2 carries on immediately after the end of the previous game. This time, the Miyazaki-inspired story follows Ori through a new forest in search of a missing friend, with a new antagonist, new puzzles and new enemies to fight. Will of the Wisps is more combat-focused than its predecessor, and features a more free-form upgrade path as well as a more streamlined save system. The art style is as stunning as ever, with its 2D platforming style presented in glorious 3D rendered visuals with twilight-hued colour throughout. Partner this with an atmospheric soundtrack that perfectly mirrors the action on screen, and you have an absolute feast for the senses. Ori and the Will of the Wisps isn't a flawless experience, with critics singling out the repetitive combat as a weak area, but most agree that the game is well worth your time. Overall reviews were positive, resulting in a Metacritic score of 89, and given its status as a new release, makes the cost of the Xbox Games Pass for Windows worth it all by itself. Honourable mention, Ori and the Blind Forest. I'd be remiss in my duty as a top 10 lister if I didn't mention the fact that Will of the Wisps' predecessor, Blind Forest, is also available on Xbox Game Pass for Windows. Technically, with a score of 88, it belongs at about number 10 on the list, but I thought I'd squeeze it in as a bonus. If you enjoy Will of the Wisps, you'll love Ori and the Blind Forest too. Number 6. Pillars of Eternity. Many PC gamers who are active in the late 90s will have fond memories of Black Isle's AD&D role-playing games like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale and Planescape Torment. Many of the former team members of Black Isle went on to work at Obsidian Entertainment, who kickstarted this unlicensed spiritual successor to those games in 2012 and released 3 years later in March 2015. For those who haven't played any of its forebears, Pillars of Eternity is an overhead 2.5D party-based fantasy RPG with a semi-real-time combat system that allows players to pause the game, issue commands and then see how the encounter plays out. Reviewers were generally favourable, praising the game's art style, combat mechanics and typically in-depth storyline. Some were less impressed, mainly with the lack of humour and memorability compared to the games that inspired it, but this shouldn't stop any fans of the Baldur's Gate series from having a great time. Pillars of Eternity received an aggregate score of 89. If you're enjoying the video so far and want to show your support for the channel, a like would be appreciated, and you can keep up to date with my latest uploads by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. Cheers! Number 5. Slay the Spire. For those who saw my top 10 for the best reviewed PC games of last year, see the link above, you'll know that I hadn't played this and didn't really intend to. Well, thanks to my decision to capture all of the footage for this list myself rather than use trailers, well, I guess I had to play Slay the Spire. This unlikely blend of turn-based deck building and roguelike dungeon crawling by developers Metacritic finally released in 2019. Your quest, as the name suggests, is to roll yourself a character from one of the 4 main archetypes, fight your way up a spire room by room, building up your card deck as you go, refining your card selection into a more offensive, balanced or defensive build. You'll be challenged as you progress by trash mobs, tougher elites and bosses, and should you fail, the game's permadeath system puts you right back at the start in a newly generated spire to try all over again. Reviewers call Slay the Spire an example of one of the very best in both of its genres. Praise in particular comes for the tight, uncluttered deck building mechanic, satisfying combo-based combat, and variety of content, while being less enthused about the overall art style. Slay the Spire earned a Metacritic score of 89. For those who wondered, I'm still not a fan. Number 4. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. Like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons is a game for those who aren't completely dead inside. This unique puzzle adventure game was developed by Starbreeze Studios in 2013. In this game you play as both of the titular brothers simultaneously, with each controlled by one half of the gamepad. The game's puzzles usually require you to use both brothers in tandem to clear obstacles, distract NPCs, or make use of one character's unique attributes. The game's story is told in a fictional language, and so most of the meaning is carried through body language or the environment. I can't tell you too much of the plot without venturing into spoiler territory, but the synopsis is that the two brothers set off to save their dying father, and are beset by challenges, obstacles and distractions along the way. Reviewers have praised Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons for its emotive animation, attractive art style and touching narrative, comparing it favourably to classics of the art game subgenre like Eco, Journey and Limbo, and rewarding it with a score of 90. Number 3. Metro 2033 Redux. Released in 2010, shortly after Crysis, the original PC-destroying FPS, Metro 2033 was another game that felt the need to challenge the hardware available at the time. Based on a series of novels set in the subways of post-apocalypse Moscow, Metro 2033 contrasts with Crysis by being a more gritty, run-down vision of the future. Taking place mostly in a claustrophobic underground network, you are only briefly allowed into daylight. Outdoors in the toxic air and in full view of your enemies, you are at your most vulnerable. Like the Fallout series, the human survivors of this nuclear war have splintered into different factions. Animals have mutated and corrupted into dangerous beasts, and a new threat is posed by the mysterious group known as the Dark Ones. Playing as main character Artyom, you must navigate these warring groups in order to survive, operating on minimal resources. Ammunition and medical packs are scarce, pockets of radiation are everywhere, and surface travel requires the use of short-duration air filters. This 2014 remaster brought the games even further up to date than the already exceptionally attractive original game, with new models, textures and animations. The relatively small number of written reviews for this re-release may throw some doubt as to the accuracy of the Metacritic score of 90, and the user score on the same site rates it at only an 8 out of 10. However, I enjoyed my time playing Metro Redux. I'm an FPS fan, and at the end of the day, it's my list. Number 2. Opus Magnum. Puzzle games have traditionally only had the most tenuous relationship to narrative. Lemmings revolved around a simple premise, Tetris didn't even bother with the story at all. Later examples like Portal 2 go to extremes, wrapping their premise in an enthralling storyline. Opus Magnum sits somewhere in the middle. Developed by puzzle game specialists Zachtronics and released in 2017, your game screen consists of a deceptively simple hex grid. Your actions in this programming puzzle game have a purpose. You're an alchemist, creating machines out of a selection of available parts, manipulating atoms in order to create a specific end product. Your success is measured not only in achieving your goal, but doing so more efficiently than other players, either by making your machine cheaper, or faster, or occupy less space. It's a lot harder to explain than it is to play, or at least a lot harder to make it sound interesting. Still, once you've got the hang of it, the complexity is a large part of the charm, and the addition of charts to show how your machine compares to those of other players adds a layer of competition. Opus Magnum hasn't exactly attracted a lot of press attention, with only 4 reviews available presently on Metacritic. Its sparse utilitarian visual style doesn't make for a particularly enthralling YouTube thumbnail either, so I feel that Opus Magnum is going to continue to fly under many players' radar. Nevertheless, the reviews are generally very positive, and this addictive puzzler has earned itself the number 2 spot in this chart with a score of 90. Number 1. Undertale. 2015's Undertale, developed by Toby Fox as a mostly solo effort, is no stranger to critics' top 10 lists. With a story premise reminiscent of those from children's stories and gameplay that echoes classic 8-bit RPGs, like Mother, Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, Undertale enjoys not only borrowing liberally from popular media of the past, but also subverting the player's expectations. Wandering around the game's overhead map, exploring dungeons and open areas, the player encounters the kinds of NPCs, puzzles and hostile opponents as you might expect of an RPG. However, while each combat encounter in the game is some variety of minigame, often a bullet hell style shooter that invites the player to participate, they can also be avoided or worked around should the player wish. Enemies are often sympathetic characters in their own right, or can be manipulated by expressing kindness instead of being treated as opponents to be defeated, and it is this freedom to choose your character's personality through their actions that helps define the game. Undertale's presentation depends very much on your own tastes. There's no danger of this being mistaken for a AAA project by a large creative team. There's nothing about the game's graphics or animation that would tax a console or even a smartphone. And even the sound and music feels authentic to the kinds of games that inspired it. This style is inextricable from Undertale's personality. It expresses a unique sense of humour and charm that has delighted players and reviewers since before its release, when it was simply a trailer on Kickstarter. Packed full of memorable characters and set pieces, Undertale belies its simple exterior and offers an unforgettable gaming experience. It currently stands as the most critically well-reviewed game available as part of your Xbox Game Pass for Windows subscription, with a Metacritic score of 92. And that's my list. Hopefully those of you who picked up a Game Pass PC subscription recently will find it useful. How many of you tried so far? Do you have any personal favourites you'd like to mention? Let me know below. While you're down there, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.